Can you all see it? Yes, I think.
Yes.
Okay, now, if you have some questions, again, I want you to reserve your question, and then later on, I will ask for some clarifications, then you can ask your question. Okay, so this afternoon, we're going to continue our discussion on skin integrity and wound care. Last time, we discussed the basic concepts, the physiology. We also discussed the different factors that affect skin integrity. We also discuss the different stages of pressure ulcer. We also discuss the topic on nursing diagnosis or the different nursing problems that you can encounter. So at this point, we are now on the later part of our topic, and we're going to discuss nursing management. This is very important, especially when you work as a nurse. You need to perform these preventive measures, and you need to learn how to treat pressure ulcer. Okay? On the slides right now, the nursing management is divided into two parts. It could either be preventive. That is our number one role, to prevent the development of pressure ulcer. Okay? However, in some instances, if we cannot prevent pressure ulcer, that's the time we provide treatment. Okay, and I'm going to discuss one by one. Part of your prevention is providing nutrition. We already discussed these things because nutrition is important for wound recovery and healing. We're going to discuss that later on. Part of your prevention also is skin hygiene. How do you clean the skin? Especially if the patient is incontinent. Number 3, avoiding skin trauma. Number 4, using different supportive devices to prevent pressure ulcers. And the second part of this nursing management is on the treatment. What will you do? You either clean the wound, you dress the wound, and support the wound. And that is what we're going to discuss this afternoon. Okay, as mentioned on our first session with regards to skin integrity and wound care, we mentioned that one of the most important factor that influence skin integrity is nutrition. Okay, and we mentioned that vitamins, minerals, and proteins are very important for recovery of our cells, of our muscles. Now, aside from those that we have mentioned earlier, it is also important to have an adequate fluid intake, at least 2,500, to keep the skin well hydrated. The proteins and vitamins are very important. Proteins, that is for muscle repair. Vitamins and zinc, that is very important to prevent infection or to improve immune system, to prevent wound infection. Okay? For patients who are compromised, for patients who are very, very sick, we give additional nutritional supplements. Okay. Now, part of this intervention is we monitor also the weight of our patient. Why? Because the weight of our patient will tell us whether the patient is what? Well-nourished or malnourished or not. And of course, part of our intervention is checking for the laboratory monitoring. Why? Because by checking the lab tests of our patient, we will know if the protein level in the blood is normal. Or we will know if the patient's immune system is poor by checking for the hemoglobin levels and lymphocyte counts. These are your intervention when providing nutrition to your patient to prevent pressure ulcer and wound complications. Skin hygiene is very important to promote skin integrity. Okay? Especially that we have mentioned earlier, if the patient is incontinent. Incontinent means the patient's urinate, the patient's defecate in the bed. And that is the most important predisposing factor for what? For pressure ulcers. So how do we prevent those complications? First is use mild cleansing agent. See? We need to use sabon. Okay? Take note, use mild cleansing agent only. Why? Because if you're going to use harsh soap, it might what? Alter the natural skin barriers. Again, use only mild soap. Second one, use a moisturizing lotion, especially if the skin is very dry, especially if the skin is dehydrated. It is easily gets wound and skin in the pressure ulcer. So what do? You moisturize it with lotion. Number 3, keep skin clean and dry and free from urination, okay, or sweat or feces. This is what we have been discussing since last time. If the patient is incontinent, make sure to clean regularly and change the diaper or incontinence sheet of your patient, or else it could be a potential source of pressure ulcer. And most importantly, this is what you need to remember. If you have noticed that the patient has pressure ulcer, even if it is just first stage, there is redness already on the site, avoid doing massage. Again, if you have noticed pressure ulcer on the skin, even if it is first stage level only, again, avoid doing massage. Why? Because doing massage on the area, on the reddened area, will actually cause damage or trauma to the skin tissue. Again, cleansing soap, moisturizing lotion, keeping the area clean and dry. Number 4, avoid massaging the area. That's why you will see in the photo, there is X. The lower photo has X, which means you never do that in an area with pressure ulcer. Okay. Another is avoiding skin trauma. If your patient is bedridden, if your patient is immobile, if your patient is unconscious, you need to check and inspect the pressure points. As we have mentioned earlier, the pressure points are the areas of the body that are prone to pressure ulcers. So what do? You need to inspect and palpate. Try to check for circulation. Try to check if you have observed some discoloration. Try to check capillary refill, means the circulation in the area. You need to check for the blanch response. We know already what is blanch. You press the area and take note of changes in color. Okay? And aside from that, what else? Palpate bony prominences. Never do massage, but you can palpate. Again, palpate and massage are different. Massage is not applicable, but you can inspect and palpate the area to know if there is skin trauma or injury. Okay. Now, in the photo right now, you will see what are the body pressure areas that you need to inspect and check. It was discussed already in the lab. You have the heels, the sacrum, the elbows, the occipital area. If the patient is in side-lying position, what are the pressure points? The medial and the lateral condyle. You have the greater trochanter, you have the ilium. The shoulder also is a body pressure area. Even the ears and the parietal and temporal areas. Again, you need to check all those areas if your patient is immobile. If your patient is in prone position and if your patient is in Fowler's position again, there are pressure points that you need to check, palpate, and inspect. And I want you to read what are those body pressure areas. It is in your slide right now. You have the toes, you have your knees, your genitalia, the breast for women, the shoulder, the cheek, and the ear. If the patient is in Fowler's position, you have the heels, the pelvis, the sacrum, and the vertebrae. Again, part of your nursing responsibility is to inspect, palpate, check for those pressure points for any potential beginning of a pressure ulcer. Okay, now, part of your nursing intervention is avoiding skin trauma. How do you avoid skin trauma? Number one, if your patient has been on bed for several days, your patient is immobile, your patient is unconscious, you need to provide exercise in the bed. You have your range of motion exercises. You've discussed that several times. You have the active and passive range of motion exercises. If your patients can ambulate, you might offer assistance and do your patients a little walking to relieve pressure in the back. If there is lifting devices, okay, just like what you see in the photo right now, the first photo, the patient is in the lifting device. Rather than pushing or pulling the patient, use lifting device in order to avoid friction on the back. Remember, friction is #1 cause of pressure ulcer. And with the use of lifting device, you are avoiding friction. Number 3, use of supportive devices. We've been doing this in the lab. You need to have additional pillows. You need to have donuts. You need to have wedges, pillows, greater trochanter. Those are supportive devices. And these supportive devices can actually prevent pressure ulcer. That's why we place them on pressure points. And the last, this is very important. Turning schedule, which means you turn your patient either on the right side lateral or on the left side lateral every 2 hours. Again, every 2 hours. If you are the nurse on duty on the hospital, you have a patient who is in comatose, unconscious, you need to move your patient to the right and to the left every 2 hours. And the purpose of turning the patient is to avoid pressure on the pressure points in the back and to prevent pressure ulcer. Okay, now we have mentioned already what are the preventive management. Now, when you work in the hospital, you might actually see pressure ulcer itself. If you cannot prevent pressure ulcer, it is very important that you know how to treat it. Now, if your patient has an actual pressure ulcers, you need to provide treatment to the patient. How do you provide treatment to the patient? In providing treatment to the pressure ulcer of the patient, you need to remember a system. We call this system as RYB wound classification system. Why is it important for you to learn this system? This wound classification system will tell you exactly what treatment would you provide to the patient by just assessing the wound color. Again, the RYB wound classification system will guide nurses in providing a specific treatment for pressure ulcer of the patient by just looking, by just observing to the color of the wound. So how do you do this? Let us see. Okay, if you observe, if you assess a red wound, how do I know if it is a red wound? Very simple. You just need to look at the wound of your patient and describe the color. Just like what we have in the slide right now. Can you see the color of the wound? The wound is color red. And a red wound indicates that it is granulating, which means it is starting to heal because granulation tissue is starting to develop. If there is granulation tissue and the wound appears red, what would be your nursing management? Number 1, requires protection to avoid disturbance in tissue regeneration. Since the wound, the red wound, is healing, Our goal here is what? Make sure to protect the wound. Why? Because it is healing. It is recovering. And what specific nursing intervention that you can do? You just do a simple wound cleaning or cleansing. And of course, you apply dressing. What is dressing? It is a material that you apply over the wound. Okay? Later on, I'm going to show you what is wound dressing and why do we dress the wound. Okay, that is for the red wound. But what if during assessment, instead of a red wound, you have noted a yellow wound? Just like what you have on the photo right now. The color of the wound is yellow. So what do you do with that? And what yellow wound indicates? Yellow wound is characterized by primarily liquid to semi-liquid slough and is often accompanied by purulent drainage or infection. Yellow wound indicates infection. So, if the wound is suspected to have an infection and the wound has a color of yellow, what would be your nursing intervention? See, it requires gentle cleansing. It requires irrigation. Irrigation is washing of the wound. I'm going to show you later on how do you wash the wound. And of course, aside from cleaning and aside from washing the wound, you apply antimicrobial medication. Why do you give antimicrobial medication? Because the wound has infection. And last but not the least, what if the color of the wound is black? Is it possible to see a black wound in the hospital? Yes. Black wound is covered with thick necrotic tissue or eschar. Necrotic tissue means dead tissue. Dead tissue. So, if you have noticed a dead tissue or necrotic tissue, what do you think is the treatment for this kind of wound? Normally, for necrotic or dead tissue, it requires debridement. Debridement is that you remove this black color wound. You remove the dead tissue. You remove the necrotic tissue. Why do you need to remove this one? Because it's already dead. It has to be removed, or else the wound will not recover. Aside from debridement, if the wound is black, of course, it requires also cleansing and application of dressing. Now, again, take note of the different colors of the wound. We have red, we have yellow, we have black. On each types of wound color, we have a specific treatment. For red color, it requires protection, and we need to perform cleansing and application of dressing. If the wound is yellow, that means it is infected. So most probably, I will irrigate the wound, I will clean the wound, and I will put antibiotic ointment. For black wound, that definitely involves removal of the necrotic tissue. It is called as debridement. Take note of the three types of wound and take notes what are the specific nursing management for each types of wound. Okay, just before I continue my discussion, do we have any clarifications or questions? You can type in the chat box if you have some clarifications. If you do not have any clarifications, we will proceed. All clear? Shall we proceed, yes or no? Okay, no more question. We will proceed. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, as we have mentioned earlier, part of our treatment for a pressure ulcer or a wound is to irrigate. What do we mean by irrigate? Irrigation is simply washing the wound or flushing out the area to clean, to apply heat, and to apply microbial solution. I want you to look at the first photo. See, with the use of large syringe, okay, it contains normal saline, The wound is flushed, the wound is washed with normal saline solution. It is basically washing or flushing out the wound in order to clean. And after cleaning, antimicrobial medication is applied. That is irrigation. How about packing? Normally, after you irrigate the wound, after you wash or flush the wound, the next thing that the doctor might do, especially for third stage pressure ulcer, you can see already the tissue inside. You can see already the muscles and the bones. The doctor will normally apply what? Gauze to pack the wound. And the very purpose why we pack the wound with gauze is to absorb exudates. I want you to look at the photo number 2. And what I can see is that the patient has a third stage pressure ulcer. Okay? Third stage or fourth stage, I can see already the muscles, some subcutaneous tissue. Now, after the doctor cleanse the wound or irrigate the wound, take note or observe that the doctor applied gauze inside the wound. And the very purpose of that gauze is to absorb the exudates. Okay? To absorb the exudates. We have already discussed what are the exudates, right? Those are fluid cells that are produced by the wound. Again, irrigation and packing. Now, this is important because next week, your nursing procedure to be performed is wound dressing. So what do you understand about wound dressing? Wound dressing is normally applied or performed to your patient in order to protect the wound from mechanical injury. You cover. Dressing the wound is simply covering it with sterile material to protect the wound from mechanical injury. Number 2, to provide or maintain moist wound healing. Okay? Number 3, thermal insulation. What is thermal insulation? If you have an open skin, normally, what will happen? It doesn't have thermal protection because it's an open wound. Okay? And it is very risky for extreme temperature. That's why you need to cover it with a gauze. Number 4, absorb drainage or debris the wound. If your wound keeps on producing exudate, the purpose of the wound dressing is to absorb the exudates. Okay? Prevent hemorrhage is also important. If the wound is bleeding, you apply pressure and then apply a dressing wound, it will stop the bleeding. And of course, number 6, splint or immobile the wound. If you have a wound, normally you don't want to move your wound. Why? Because if you keep on moving and moving your wound, the normal healing process is disturbed, as I have mentioned earlier. And your nursing intervention now, in order to protect the wound from excessive mobilization, is to put a dressing in order to immobile, to keep it protected, to apply a splint, okay, so as not to disturb the healing process. Basically, these are the purposes why you dress the wound. Okay? And when you look at the photo right now, see, the patient has a wound in the palm. And basically, the wound is covered by a dressing. We call it as wound dressing. And that is exactly what you're going to do next week in the lab. Okay, now, these are basically the materials that you need to use when you dress the wound. We call it as dressing materials. Okay, so what are the different dressing materials that you might apply in the wound? These are the basic dressing materials that we have in the hospital. I want you to look at the first photo. See? The wound is covered by a transparent material. We call it as transparent film. And the good, yes, question? Okay. Transparent film. But in the hospital, what you will see is that the wound is covered by a gauze which is not transparent. It is covered by white gauze. you will not see the wound. That is the ordinary dressing material that you have in the hospital, and that is the dressing material that we have in the lab. But in many hospitals, they are using already the transparent dressing. The first photo that you can see is a transparent dressing. And when you use transparent dressing, okay, you can easily see, you can easily assess the wound. The good thing about this transparent film is that it is easily, the wound can be easily assessed. You will know if it is, developing or healing normally, or if it is infected. And normally we use this one for IV dressing. If you have Amalia, okay. If you have IV, and then you cover it with the dressing, normally we use a transparent dressing. And if you have stage 1 pressure ulcer, we use transparent dressing. The second type of dressing material is very important because by the word itself, impregnated dressing means the dressing itself contains what? Some substances, okay, that promotes healing in the wound. In fact, in some hospitals, their dressing itself contains medication already to promote healing of the wound. We call it as impregnated, non-adherent dressings. And normally we use this one if we have a post-operative wound, or if we have a wound or a burn patient. Okay, again, impregnated non-adherent dressing. This type of dressing normally has medications already on the dressing itself. It is primarily used if the patient has post-operative wound or if the patient has burns. Okay? This one, the third type, don't you worry, you will learn all different types of dressing when you go to other courses because there are hundreds of dressing materials. But I'm going to discuss only 3. The third type of dressing materials is hydrocolloids. And this type of hydrocolloids, it has an absorbing materials. It absorbs exudates. Okay, that's why this is very, very effective for pressure ulcer at stages 3 and 4. Okay, again, this is very effective to absorb exudates and it facilitates healing, particularly for stage 3 and 4 pressure ulcer. Okay. I think we have very few left, but I need to discuss these things. Okay, now, next week, you will be asked by your teachers to clean a surgical wound. At the same time, you will be asked by your teachers to dress a wound. In doing this procedure, there are things that you need to remember. Okay? First is follow standard precautions. How do you do this? Wear your gloves. Remember, wound is considered as infectious, and you don't want to clean the wound with your bare hands. So part of standard precautions is to wear gloves. Number 2, if a wound is grossly contaminated, clean the wound at every dressing change, which means every time you change the cover of the wound, make sure to clean it always. There are some nurses who just change the dressing without cleaning the wound. It is wrong. Number 3, use gauze square, avoid cotton because it shed fibers into the wound surface. What does it mean? I want you to look at the third photo. There is an X and you can see cotton. Normally, when you clean the wound at home, you use cotton, correct? But in the hospital, as much as possible, instead of cotton, you use the gauze. I want you to look at the photo number 4 we check. It is gauze. That is exactly what we need to use to clean the wound. Why? If you use cotton, there are some fibers. And when you clean the wound, some fibers are left on the wound. it would be very difficult for the wound to heal if there are some cotton fibers left on the wound. That's why we avoid cotton. Number 4, avoid drying the wound after cleaning it. Lesh, why we don't dry the wound? Because the moisture could actually help in promoting healing. Okay? Avoid drying the wound after cleaning it. We keep it moist. And number 5, this is very, very important, and this is normally included in the exam questions. How do you clean the wound? For surgical wound, clean the wound outward, just like how you swab. You start going outside. So you should start going outside. And surgical wound considered as the cleanest, and the surrounding tissue is considered as the dirtiest. So when you start outside and go inside, alas, you are contaminating the wound. That's why cleaning of the wound should start from the center in an outward direction. What you can see in the slide right now is another technique of cleaning the wound, but you would not, again, cleaning the wound start from the center, and then on the side, and then on the other side. We are going to show this technique exactly next week when we demonstrate to you wound dressing. Okay, let's move on. Now, aside from applying wound dressing to your wound, and aside from cleaning the wound, there would be some instances that you need to provide support and immobilize the wound. Again, we've mentioned earlier that the reason why we need to immobilize the wound. Most wound, especially during the early healing process, it should not be disturbed. That's why we need to immobilize them. Because the moment we keep on moving and immobilizing the wound, the healing process is disturbed. Granulation process will be disturbed. And that is very important. Support and immobilize. So how do you support and immobilize? Normally, if a patient has surgical wound, we apply bandages. I know you are familiar with bandages and binders. See? On the slide right now, you will see different sizes of bandages. This is exactly what you're going to use in the lab next week when you learn how to immobilize the wound. Okay? Primarily, the reason why we apply bandages and binders. See the photo number 2? There is an abdominal binder. Maybe the patient had surgery of the abdomen. Okay? And the patient is wearing abdominal binders. So, what's the purpose of bandages and binders? 1, support the wound. Number 2, immobilize the wound. Number 3, apply pressure. Okay? Number 4, securing a dressing. Securing a dressing means when you apply wound dressing, it might fail. But when you apply bandage over it, it will be secured. And retaining warmth. Okay, next week or a week after next week, you will be doing these types of bandaging technique. This is very exciting procedure because it will perform, will practice, and maybe in the exam, this might be included in the OSCE. We are not yet sure. That's why it's very important for you to learn how to perform these types of bandaging technique. Okay, I want you to look at photo number 1. We call it a circular turn. Circular turn is normally performed when you start the bandaging and you end the bandaging to anchor and terminate. You start bandaging here, you start with circular. You complete the bandaging here, you end it with circular turns. You will do that in the lab, don't worry. The second type of bandaging technique is called spiral turns. I want you to look at the photo number 2. See? Circular turns. These are normally performed in an area or body parts that are fairly uniform in circumference, such as the lower arm and the lower leg. On the other hand, is spiral reverse, and this is the most complicated type of bandaging technique. I want you to see the photo number 3. It looks complicated. However, you will learn that in the lab. Your teacher will teach you how to do it. And normally, we perform spiral reverse to bandage cylindrical parts that are not uniform in area. Okay, again, spiral turn for uniform area. Reverse spiral turns in non-uniform area. Normally, perform in lower leg and lower arm, done on upper arm and upper leg. Okay. And this is also very exciting. The last 2 types of bandaging technique. Number 4 is called figure of 8 turns. This is actually performed to bandage an area with joints, such as elbow, such as the knee, and such as the ankle. This type of bandaging technique is called figure of 8. Why it is called 8? You will learn that in the lab. Your teachers will show you why it is called figure of 8. Why not figure of 7? Why not figure of 6? Why 8? Teachers will show you that. And last but not the least, you have the recurrent turns. And this is normally performed to bandage distal parts of the body. Distal parts means the farthest part of the body, like your head. If you had head injury because of trauma or accident, the nurse might perform recurrent bandage with you. Or if you have wound in your hands, okay, a recurrent bandage also is performed. Have you seen a stump or a diabetic patient? Normally, diabetic patient and the arm is cut. And what is left is this. We call this a stump. And normally, to bandage this end of the stump, we normally use the recurrent turns. When you go to the lab, you will see a mannequin there without hands and without legs. Those end parts are called stump. And the most difficult type of bandaging technique for that is called recurrent bandage. Okay? Okay, 2 slides. I'll just complete this one, guys, so that we don't have any remaining topic. Aside from I want photo. See, a boy has abdominal binders. Maybe the boy had abdominal surgery. In order to support and immobilize the abdominal wound, you might apply a binder. We call it as straight abdominal binder. We also have another type of binder, which is called as arm sling. If you have a fracture of your arms, okay, maybe because of accident or injury, to immobilize or support your arm, the nurse might perform arm sling application. Okay? Don't you worry, arm sling application, straight abdominal binder application, it will be demonstrated to you by your teachers in the lab. Again, the purpose of the binders is to immobilize and support the part. Okay, this is the last slide that we have right now. And you need to remember this one because, as I mentioned earlier, you will be applying bandage to your classmates or to the mannequin next week. So what are the things that you need to remember when applying bandage and binders? First, bandage the body part in its normal position. What's the normal position? Just ask your patient to relax. Okay. Number 2, pad between skin surfaces and over bony prominences. What do we mean by pad between skin surfaces? Which means, if you're going to apply bandage in these bony prominences, you need to put some gauze or skin pad before you apply the bandage. This will add protection to the bony prominences of your patient. This number 3 is very important. It is normally included in the exam. When you apply the bandage, you should start from the distal to the proximal. If I'm going to bandage my arm, okay, this is the distal and this is the proximal. So how do I apply the bandage? How do I apply the bandage? I will start from here, going here. But why do I do that? Why should I not start from here and go here? Why should be from distal and proximal? Because of the blood circulation. Start from here to allow flow of blood to go to your heart. The moment you start applying bandage here, you will be compromising the blood flow of your patient. Okay? Number 4, bandage with even pressure. I want you to look at photo number 3. There are circles. Okay? And normally these circles will guide you if the amount of pressure that you are exerting in every turns of your bandage is equal or not. If it is too tight or too loose. We call it as bandage with even pressure. Number 5, if possible, leave the end of the body part exposed. If I'm applying bandage in my hand, I will not include these fingers. If I'm going to apply bandage on my legs, in my feet, I'm not going to include the toes. Why? Because, okay, why this has to left exposed? Because it is where you can assess for the adequacy of blood circulation. It is where you're going to check whether the flow from this part to my fingers are adequate by assessing the toes of your finger, by checking for the blood flow, by checking for the capillarity fill, and by checking for the color. The purpose is for assessment of the blood flow. And number 5, cover dressing with bandages at least 5 centimeters beyond edges of the dressing. If this is my wound and I need to apply bandage on this area, I need to apply at least 5 centimeters before and 5 centimeters after. So start from here and end it here, and the wound is at the center. Okay? At least 5 centimeters on both edges. Again, you're going to apply those guidelines when you do your bandaging technique in the lab next week or in the following week. Now, I'm done with my PowerPoint. So I'm going to ask you, I'm so sorry because I accidentally turned off my the screen. Okay, now I want to ask if you have some questions. Okay. If you have some questions, please kindly put in the chat box. Oh. We need bonus. Bonus for what? Bonus for what?